Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The following content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or professional advice. The history and mechanics of the divorce industry are complex and vary significantly by jurisdiction. This video explores cultural trends and historical case studies, rather than providing actionable instructions for personal legal matters. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with a licensed attorney or qualified professional regarding their specific circumstances before making any decisions related to matrimonial law or digital education platforms. In 2023 alone, the United States saw a divorce filed roughly every 42 seconds. That is over 2,000 dissolutions a day, creating a multi-billion-dollar economy that most people only see from the inside of a courtroom. But while the legal system has remained largely stagnant for a century, a quiet revolution has been brewing in the digital space. Imagine a world where the most painful, expensive, and confusing moment of a person's life was filtered through a structured, high-level curriculum, a divorce university, designed to replace chaotic emotional fallout with data-driven strategy. For decades, the barrier to entry for legal knowledge was a six-figure law degree and a mahogany row office. Today, that barrier has crumbled. We are witnessing the rise of a new cultural phenomenon: the democratization of domestic litigation through online education. This isn't just about filling out forms. It is about the historical shift from being a client to becoming an educated protagonist in your own legal saga. By the end of this deep dive, you will understand how we moved from the era of fault-based social stigma to the modern, hyper-optimized digital campus of marital dissolution. We are opening the loop on how information asymmetry is being weaponized, and why the online university model is the ultimate disruptor of the traditional American legal complex. The American public currently faces a systemic crisis: the justice gap. Recent historical trends suggest that nearly 80% of the legal needs of low to moderate income individuals go unmet, often because the cost of professional representation outpaces the average American's savings. This deep dive solves that specific point of friction by tracing the cultural evolution of self-advocacy. We are going to break down the exact shift from the 1970s no-fault revolution to the 2020s digital academy boom. You will learn how the pioneers of online legal education identified the psychological pain points of the American consumer and packaged complex statutory law into digestible, learn-at-your-own-pace modules. We are moving beyond the surface level to explore the infrastructure of these platforms, how they use instructional design, community forums, and expert-led webinars to provide a potential outcome of clarity in a sea of procedural chaos. To understand where we are going, we have to look at the historical data of the fault era. Prior to 1969, divorce in America was a theater of the absurd. You couldn't just get a divorce, you had to prove a wrong. Adultery, abandonment, or extreme cruelty were the only keys to the exit. This created a culture of private investigators and staged photographs. The university of that era was the back alley lawyer's office. However, when Ronald Reagan signed the Family Law Act in California, the floodgates opened. The demand for information skyrocketed. This was the first great uncoupling of American history, where the volume of cases began to overwhelm the capacity of traditional law firms. This volume created a vacuum. Whenever you have a high volume, high stress, and high cost process, the market inevitably seeks an educational solution to lower the barrier to entry. Think about the transition from the physical library to the digital database. In the 1980s and 90s, the educational aspect of divorce was found in self-help books like Divorce for Dummies, or specialized kits found in the back of magazines. These were the proto-universities. They offered the first case studies of pro se litigants, individuals representing themselves, challenging the monopoly of the Bar Association. But books are static. They don't offer feedback. They don't offer community. As the internet matured in the early 2000s, we saw the birth of the knowledge economy. This is where the concept of a university really takes shape. It wasn't enough to just have the forms. People needed the why and the how. They needed a syllabus for their life's transition. Data from the American Bar Association shows a steady increase in self-represented litigants over the last 20 years. In some jurisdictions, up to 70% of family law cases involve at least one party without an attorney. This is the student body of the divorce university. They are not looking for a quick fix. They are looking for a comprehensive understanding of complex topics: equitable distribution, the best interests of the child standard, and the nuances of spousal support calculations. The online university model thrives here because it mirrors the structure of higher education. Instead of a $400 per hour consultation that lasts 60 minutes, the online student pays for a library of content they can review 100 times. This shift represents a fundamental change in American consumer behavior, the preference for information access over professional gatekeeping. Let's look at a case study of how these online platforms are structured today. A successful digital divorce academy doesn't just list the law, it utilizes micro-learning techniques. They break down a massive topic like dividing marital assets into 12-minute videos. One video might cover the historical trend of community property versus equitable distribution. Another might dive deep into the specific actuarial data needed to value a 401k or a pension. This step-by-step detail allows the viewer to build a knowledge stack. By the time they reach a courtroom or a mediation table, their level of literacy is significantly higher than the average client of 30 years ago. This reduces the information asymmetry that has historically allowed the legal industry to maintain high price points. The cultural history of this movement is also tied to the creator economy. In the last decade, family law experts have realized that their most valuable asset isn't their time, it's their expertise. By productizing their knowledge into an online course or university format, they can reach thousands of people simultaneously. This is the ultimate scale. We see this in the way modern divorce coaches and legal consultants use YouTube and specialized LMS, learning management systems, to create a campus atmosphere. There are study groups, office hours via Zoom, and downloadable workbooks that guide a person through the emotional and financial audit of their marriage. But why is this happening specifically in America? The U.S. legal system is uniquely adversarial. Unlike many civil law systems in Europe, the American common law tradition relies heavily on precedent and aggressive advocacy. This win-lose framework creates high stakes. When the stakes are high, the value of education increases. The divorce university provides a potential outcome of strategic preparedness. It turns a vulnerable individual into a savvy navigator of the system. We are talking about a total cultural rebranding of divorce. It is moving from a shameful secret to a managed project. This project management approach is the backbone of the online university model. It treats the end of a marriage like a corporate merger or a restructuring, utilizing the same pedagogical tools used in MBA programs. The historical shift we are discussing is also a response to the digital transformation of the courts themselves. With the advent of e-filing and virtual hearings, the physicality of the law is vanishing. If the court is online, it only makes sense that the preparation for the court is online. This creates a seamless transition for the digital native. For a generation that learned how to code on YouTube, how to invest on Robinhood, and how to cook on Masterclass, the idea of a divorce university isn't radical, it's logical. It is the natural conclusion of the democratization of information. In this series, we are going to peel back the layers of this industry. We will look at the specific business models of these online academies, the psychological tactics they use to keep students engaged during their darkest hours, and the pushback they face from the traditional legal establishment. We will examine the data on pro se success rates and how education, real deep dive education, is the only true equalizer in a system built for those with deep pockets. This is part 1 of the masterclass. We have set the stage. The history is written in the shift from the courtroom to the classroom. Now we prepare to enter the lecture hall of the modern American divorce. To understand how a digital campus for marital dissolution became a viable reality in 2026, we have to examine the specific architectural failure of the American legal system that made it necessary. Imagine a citizen named Alex living in a mid-sized American city today. Alex is facing the end of a 15-year marriage. In the traditional 20th century model, Alex's first instinct would be to open a search engine and look for a local family law firm. The first thing Alex encounters is the retainer wall. Most high-quality firms in 2026 require an upfront payment ranging from $5,000 to $15,000 just to open a file. This is before a single motion is filed or a single minute of mediation occurs. For a middle-class American, this is an immediate financial shock. This is where the concept of the divorce university enters the cultural zeitgeist as a disruptor. The online divorce university is built on the pedagogical principle of the flipped classroom. In a traditional setting, you pay an attorney to explain basic legal concepts to you at a high hourly rate. You are paying $300 an hour to learn what marital property means. The university model flips this. It moves the lecture portion of the legal process to a pre-recorded, high-fidelity digital environment. Alex doesn't pay for an hour of a lawyer's time to learn about the difference between separate and community property. Instead, Alex logs into a portal and watches a module titled Understanding Asset Classification in the 21st Century. This module uses historical trends and case studies from the last decade to show how digital assets, like cryptocurrency or shared streaming royalties, are currently being treated by state courts. This transition was fueled by a specific historical trend: the professionalization of the pro-se litigant. Between 2010 and 2020, courts across the United States reported a massive surge in people representing themselves. However, the outcomes were often poor because these individuals were navigating a complex system without a map. They had the forms, but they didn't have the strategy. The online university filled this gap by providing what is known in educational circles as scaffolding. It takes a complex, multi-year process and breaks it down into semesters. Semester 1 is the emotional and financial audit. Semester 2 is the procedural filing and discovery phase. Semester 3 is the negotiation and settlement strategy. Let's look at a case study of a platform that gained traction in the early 2020s. They realized that the primary barrier wasn't just law. It was data management. They integrated educational videos with cloud-based organizational tools. Imagine if Alex could use a digital dashboard that synchronized with a bank account to automatically categorize expenses based on the specific standards of a local jurisdiction's child support formula. This isn't just a spreadsheet. It is an interactive textbook. The student learns the math behind the law. By the time Alex actually speaks to a legal consultant or a mediator, the conversation is no longer about the basics. It is about high-level strategy. This reduces the time spent in the billable hour trap, creating a potential outcome of significant cost savings and reduced emotional fatigue. The cultural shift also required a change in how we perceive authority. Historically, the judge and the lawyer were the sole keepers of the law, but the 2026 digital landscape is defined by decentralized knowledge. When we look at the historical data of the 2020s, we see the rise of the specialized influencer, lawyers who realized that their true value was in teaching rather than just litigating. They began creating comprehensive syllabi that covered everything from how to dress for a Zoom hearing to how to manage high-conflict personality types during a deposition. These were not just tips. They were full-scale curricula with quizzes, peer-reviewed forums, and even certificates of completion that some mediators now recognize as proof of a party's readiness to negotiate in good faith. The step-by-step detail of these online universities often begins with the discovery of the hidden economy of divorce. For example, a student like Alex might spend 3 weeks in a module focused entirely on forensic accounting for the layperson. They are taught how to look for inconsistencies in tax returns and how to use public records to track property transfers. This is information that was once guarded by expensive experts. While an online course cannot replace a certified fraud examiner, it empowers the student to know exactly what questions to ask and which documents to demand during the formal discovery process. This is the democratization of the legal toolkit. Furthermore, these platforms have leaned heavily into the psychological aspect of learning. A divorce is a period of high cognitive load. Research into adult learning suggests that when a person is under extreme stress, their ability to retain complex information drops significantly. The modern divorce university solves this by using repetitive, multimodal learning. Alex can listen to a podcast episode about alimony while driving to work, watch a detailed video on debt division during lunch, and then participate in a live Q&A session with a financial planner in the evening. This constant immersion helps normalize the legal language, stripping away the fear and intimidation that the traditional system relies on to maintain its structure. We must also consider the role of community in this educational model. In a traditional divorce, the individual is often isolated, speaking only to their attorney and perhaps a few close friends. The online university creates a cohort. Alex is in a class with 500 other people who are at the exact same stage of the process. This social learning environment allows for the sharing of real-time data. Students share which mediators in their specific state are more open to creative parenting schedules, or which filing offices are currently experiencing delays. This peer-to-peer intelligence gathering is something a single law firm could never provide. It is a living, breathing database of the current legal climate. This brings us to the concept of the educational outcome versus the legal outcome. A lawyer's goal is a signed decree. A university's goal is a knowledgeable graduate. When Alex finishes the curriculum, The potential outcome is a person who understands the long-term financial implications of their settlement. They understand how a 50-50 split of a house might actually be a net loss when considering future capital gains taxes and maintenance costs. This level of granular education is what transforms a person from a victim of a process into a manager of a transition. As we move deeper into this masterclass, we have to look at the friction. The traditional legal establishment has not sat idly by while their territory was turned into an online classroom. There are ongoing debates regarding the unauthorized practice of law, and where the line is drawn between providing education and providing legal counsel. This tension is the heart of the next phase of our history, because while Alex is getting smarter, the system is getting more defensive. The rise of the divorce university isn't just about saving money. It is about a fundamental rewrite of the American social contract regarding the end of a family unit. It is about moving from a system of litigation to a system of education. But what happens when the information you learn in the classroom contradicts the reality of the courtroom? What happens when the student becomes more informed than the professionals they are supposed to be hiring? We are entering an era of the hyper-educated consumer, and the legal industry is not prepared for the questions they are about to ask. We have explored the rise of the student and the structure of the digital campus. But there is a darker side to this history. As these universities grew, they caught the attention of the tech giants and the venture capitalists. The transition from a grassroots educational movement to a multi-billion-dollar edtech industry changed the stakes. In the next part, we will dive into the silent war over legal data and the algorithms that began to predict divorce outcomes before a single lecture was watched. The classroom was just the beginning. The real battle is over who owns the curriculum of your life. The transformation of the divorce university from a niche educational tool into a data-driven powerhouse began when the Silicon Valley investment machine realized that the end of a marriage was one of the most predictable and lucrative life events in the American economy. By 2026, the intersection of educational technology and predictive analytics has created a new kind of institutional power. To see this in action, we look at the case study of a fictional but representative entity we will call the National Matrimonial Institute. This platform didn't just offer videos. It offered a sophisticated algorithmic assessment that began the moment a user signed up. When a student like Alex enters their data into the Institute's onboarding portal, they aren't just registering for classes. They are feeding a machine learning model that has analyzed millions of historical divorce records. Imagine if Alex, while filling out a simple questionnaire about household chores and income disparity, was unknowingly being categorized into a specific outcome probability bracket. In this new era, the university model uses historical trends to tell Alex that, based on 15 years of marriage in a specific zip code with a specific debt-to-income ratio, there is a 64% likelihood that the case will settle in mediation rather than go to trial. This isn't a promise of a specific result. It is a statistical mapping of potential outcomes. This level of insight was previously the exclusive domain of senior partners at elite law firms who charged $1,000 an hour for their gut feeling. Now, it is baked into the syllabus. The cultural history of this shift is deeply tied to the monetization of legal data. Throughout the early 2020s, private companies began purchasing bulk access to court records, what we call the PACER system at the federal level and various state-level equivalents. They scraped every motion, every ruling, and every settlement agreement that was made public. They then sold this data back to the online universities. This allowed the universities to create step-by-step guides that were hyper-localized. For example, Alex might watch a module titled Navigating the Fourth Circuit Courtroom of Judge Williams. The video would break down the historical trend of that specific judge's rulings on alimony duration. It would show data points indicating that this judge rarely grants lifetime support, but is highly favorable toward rehabilitative maintenance for spouses re-entering the workforce. This creates a scenario where the student is actually more informed about the judge's history than a general practice attorney might be. We are seeing a move toward the quantified self applied to the legal arena. The online university encourages students to track their case like a stock portfolio. They use performance metrics to decide when to push for a settlement and when to wait. Step by step, the curriculum teaches the student how to use these analytics. Step 1 is the data pull, gathering all financial and procedural history. Step 2 is the trend analysis, comparing that history against the localized database. Step 3 is the tactical adjustment, modifying the legal strategy to align with the statistical path of least resistance. However, this reliance on big data introduces a significant cultural tension: the loss of the human element in domestic law. When a university curriculum is built on algorithms, it tends to favor the average. It pushes students toward the middle of the bell curve. If the data says that most people in Alex's situation settle for 30% of a specific asset, the curriculum will naturally guide Alex toward that 30% mark, even if Alex's specific circumstances might justify more. This is the hidden curriculum of the online divorce university. It isn't just teaching the law. It is subtly enforcing a standardized version of justice that prioritizes efficiency and predictability over the messy, idiosyncratic reality of human relationships. The commercialization of this educational space led to the rise of the freemium university model. By 2026, many of these platforms are free to enter. You can watch the basic lectures on filing for free, but the high-value modules, the deep dives into tax optimization, the strategies for dealing with narcissistic partners, or the access to the predictive outcome engine, are locked behind a premium subscription. This has turned the pain of divorce into a recurring revenue stream for tech companies. They have optimized the user interface to trigger the same dopamine loops as social media. Every time Alex completes a module or receives a notification that a new motion has been filed in the real world, the platform offers a new educational tool to purchase. It is a masterclass in behavioral economics applied to the most vulnerable moment of a person's life. Consider the educational infrastructure of these companies. They hire instructional designers who previously worked for major universities or corporate training programs. These designers use a technique called gamification to keep students engaged. Alex earns badges for completing financial disclosures. There are leaderboards for students who have successfully negotiated temporary parenting plans without court intervention. While this sounds trivial, the data suggests that gamified legal education leads to a 25% increase in the accuracy of the paperwork filed by self-represented litigants. The cultural impact is a shift in tone. Divorce is no longer a tragedy to be endured, but a game to be mastered. This leads us to the silent war over the curriculum itself. Who decides what the standard for a good divorce is? In the traditional system, it was the state legislature and the judiciary. In the university system, it is the platform's board of directors and their algorithm. If an online university is funded by a venture capital firm that also owns a large stake in a specific mediation service, the curriculum might subtly steer students toward mediation as the only logical choice. This is the conflict of interest that is currently being debated in the legal world of 2026. We are seeing the rise of private, digital jurisdictions where the rules are set by the educator, not the legislator. To understand the scale, we have to look at the numbers. In 2025, it was estimated that over 40% of all divorce filings in the United States were prepared using some form of an online educational platform. The revenue for these platforms has surpassed the traditional legal software market. We are talking about a cultural shift where the primary point of contact for a person ending a marriage is an AI-driven video instructor rather than a human being. This is the era of the institutionalization of the digital campus. But as these platforms become the gatekeepers of legal knowledge, a new problem has emerged. The algorithms are only as good as the data they are fed. If the historical trends used to train the AI are biased, for example, if they reflect a history of gender-based income disparity that the student is trying to move past, the university might actually be teaching the student to accept a biased outcome. This is the algorithmic glass ceiling. Alex might be learning a strategy that was optimized for the 1990s because that is where the bulk of the training data came from. The transition from a library of videos to a predictive engine has fundamentally changed the power dynamic of the American family. We are no longer just looking at a cultural history of education. We are looking at a history of how technology began to dictate the terms of our most private separations. The online university is the most powerful tool ever created for the self-represented litigant, but it is also a mirror of the society that built it. Efficient, data-hungry, and increasingly detached from the emotional weight of the human heart. As Alex finishes the advanced modules on asset protection, a new notification appears. The platform has detected a pattern in the opposing party's filings. It suggests a new module specifically designed for this exact procedural move. The loop is tightening. The student is becoming part of the machine. In the next part, we will examine the counterstrike from the American Bar Association and the secret legal battles fought in 2026 to shut these universities down under the guise of public safety. The empire is striking back, and the courtroom is about to become a battlefield for the right to teach the law. The tension between the traditional legal establishment and the burgeoning world of digital divorce universities reached a boiling point in early 2026. To understand the gravity of this conflict, we have to look at the historical trend of the unauthorized practice of law, often abbreviated as UPL. For over a century, the American Bar Association and state-level bar guilds have maintained a strict monopoly on legal information and representation. The logic was simple. The law is too complex and the stakes are too high for anyone but a licensed professional to guide a citizen through it. But as these online universities moved from simple form-filling services to sophisticated pedagogical platforms, the Bar Association saw a direct threat not just to public safety, but to the very economic foundation of the legal profession. Imagine a situation in mid-2026 where a major state bar association files a massive injunction against a platform we will call Juris Academy. The argument from the establishment is that by providing a specific syllabus that tells a student exactly how to respond to a motion for temporary support, the university is no longer just educating, it is practicing law without a license. This is the central battlefield of the year. The traditionalists argue that legal advice must be tailored to the individual, whereas the university model argues that the law is a public set of rules that every citizen has a right to learn and apply. This sparked a series of case studies across states like Florida, Texas, and New York, where the definition of education was put on trial. The counterstrike began with a series of consumer protection warnings. State regulators began issuing bulletins suggesting that online divorce universities were offering a false sense of security. They pointed to historical data showing that while students felt more empowered, a small percentage of them were missing hyper-technical filing deadlines or failing to properly serve process according to local rules of civil procedure. This was the opening salvo. The legal establishment attempted to frame the digital campus as a dangerous playground for the uninformed. They used stories of litigants who lost significant pension rights because they followed a general online module, instead of seeking a local actuarial expert. However, the divorce universities were prepared for this. Their defense was rooted in the First Amendment, the right to free speech and the right to disseminate information. They argued that if a person can buy a book on how to build a deck or how to perform basic medical first aid, they should be able to enroll in a course on how to navigate the legal dissolution of a marriage. To bolster their defense, platforms like Juris Academy began implementing rigorous compliance layers. Step by step, they redesigned their user interface to include constant, dynamic disclaimers. Every time a student like Alex would click on a module regarding child custody, the system would require a digital signature acknowledging that the content was educational and not a substitute for an attorney-client relationship. This period in 2026 saw the rise of the hybrid model as a tactical retreat. Realizing they couldn't win an all-out war against the legal elite, many divorce universities started partnering with what are known as unbundled legal service providers. Instead of just teaching the law, the university would offer a directory of attorney coaches who were willing to review a student's homework for a flat fee. This was a revolutionary shift in the business of law. It turned the lawyer from a primary service provider into a teaching assistant. The student did the heavy lifting, the data entry, the asset research, the drafting of the parenting plan, and the lawyer simply checked the work for technical errors. The data from this hybrid experiment showed fascinating potential outcomes. Case studies from this era indicated that cases using the University Plus Coach model moved through the court system 40% faster than cases with two traditional, adversarial attorneys. The courts themselves were conflicted. On one hand, judges loved receiving perfectly formatted, typed and organized filings from educated pro-SE litigants. On the other hand, the legal system's infrastructure is built on the assumption that professionals are talking to professionals. When a student like Alex stands up in a courtroom and starts citing the university's data-driven strategy modules, it disrupts the traditional flow of the bench. Let's look at the specific instructional design changes that occurred during this counterstrike. To avoid UPL charges, universities began using a method called the Socratic Digital Interface. Instead of telling Alex what to do, the platform would ask Alex a series of questions. Based on Alex's answers, the system would present 3 different historical trends of how similar situations were handled in that specific county. For example, if Alex entered that the marriage lasted 14 years and there was a significant income gap, the system would display 3 case summaries. One where permanent alimony was awarded, one where it was limited to 5 years, and one where a lump sum buyout occurred. Alex was then asked to select which educational path to study further. This design choice was a brilliant legal maneuver. It placed the decision-making power entirely in the hands of the student, shielding the university from the claim that it was giving specific legal advice. But the establishment didn't stop at litigation. They moved into the realm of technological interference. In late 2025 and early 2026, we saw the emergence of proprietary court software that was intentionally made incompatible with the data export formats used by the major divorce universities. It was a digital wall. If Alex spent months organizing their life on a university dashboard, they would suddenly find that the court's official e-filing portal wouldn't accept those files. This forced students back into the manual, confusing world of state-run websites. This was a clear attempt to re-establish the friction that the universities had worked so hard to remove. The cultural impact of this war was a massive public backlash. The American public, already frustrated by the high cost of living and the complexity of government systems, saw the Bar Association's actions as a protectionist racket. Social media was flooded with testimonials from graduates of these online campuses who felt the legal system was intentionally trying to keep them in the dark. This led to a grassroots movement of legal hackers, individuals who created open-source bridges between the university tools and the court portals. This was the digital underground of the divorce world, where code was used as a tool for justice. Step by step, the universities started to win the hearts and minds of the public by focusing on a new metric, the Peace Index. They began publishing data on how their graduates fared emotionally after the divorce. The statistics were compelling. Students who went through a structured curriculum reported lower levels of post-divorce conflict and higher satisfaction with their parenting arrangements than those who went through a traditional, high-conflict litigation process. The university wasn't just teaching law. It was teaching conflict resolution, communication, and emotional intelligence. This holistic approach made the bar associations focus on technical UPL violations, look narrow-minded and out of touch with the needs of modern families. As 2026 progresses, the battle is far from over. We are seeing the emergence of state-sponsored divorce universities, official government platforms that are attempting to co-opt the digital campus model. This is the ultimate validation of the movement. When the state realizes it can't beat the educators, it tries to become the educator. But these government versions often lack the sophisticated AI and the user-centric design of the private universities. This has created a two-tiered system of legal education: the polished, high-tech private academies and the clunky, bureaucratic state schools of law. The question for Alex and millions of others in 2026 is no longer whether they can get an education on their divorce, but which institution they trust to provide it. Is the law a product you buy, a right you exercise, or a curriculum you master? The battle for the courtroom has moved to the server room, and the stakes are nothing less than the future of the American family. But as the legal war rages, a new and unexpected player has entered the field. The big banks and insurance companies have realized that the data generated by these universities is the most accurate predictor of future financial behavior ever created. They aren't interested in the law, they are interested in the student. In the next part, we will explore the secret alliances between edtech platforms and the financial giants, and how your performance in the classroom is being used to determine your credit score, your insurance premiums, and your financial future long after the final decree is signed. The university is no longer just a school. It has become a credit bureau for your character. By the middle of 2026, the data pipeline between digital divorce universities and the broader American financial sector has become a silent but dominant force in the post-marital economy. To understand this, we have to look at how information is harvested during the educational process. When a user like Alex interacts with a platform, every click, every quiz score, and every interaction with a financial disclosure tool creates a digital footprint of reliability. In the traditional system, a credit score is built on your history of paying debt. But in the era of the divorce university, financial institutions have begun looking at what we call behavioral fiscal literacy. They are interested in how Alex handles the stress of a massive life transition, because that data is a leading indicator of future risk. Imagine if Alex is completing a module on debt allocation and spousal support. In the background, the university's software is tracking how accurately Alex inputs data into the asset spreadsheets. Does Alex consistently overlook minor debts? Does Alex demonstrate an understanding of long-term interest rates when choosing between a lump sum buyout or a structured settlement? Historical trends in 2025 showed that individuals who demonstrated high proficiency in these educational modules were statistically less likely to default on new mortgages or car loans within 3 years of their divorce. As a result, several major U.S. banks began offering preferential interest rates to graduates of certified divorce universities. This isn't a promise of wealth. It is a case study in how educational performance is being converted into financial trust. The step-by-step mechanism of this data exchange is sophisticated. Step 1 involves the anonymized data pool. The university aggregates the scores and behaviors of its student body and sells the insights to risk modeling firms. Step 2 is the individual opt-in. At the end of a semester, the platform might offer Alex a chance to share a certified graduation report with a network of lenders. Step 3 is the real-world application, where Alex applies for a post-divorce apartment and uses a university certificate of fiscal responsibility to offset a temporarily damaged credit score caused by the legal separation. This has created a new cultural hierarchy where the educated divorcee is seen as a lower risk than the one who let their attorneys handle everything in the dark. But this trend goes deeper than just credit. We are seeing a massive shift in the insurance industry. Actuarial data from the first half of 2026 suggests a strong correlation between people who complete the emotional intelligence and co-parenting tracks of an online university and a decrease in high-stress-related health insurance claims. Consequently, some forward-thinking providers have started offering premium discounts for users who maintain a high grade point average in their divorce curriculum. This is the institutionalization of the character audit. The university has moved from being a tool for legal survival to a machine for lifelong risk assessment. Let's look at a case study of a specific platform that integrated with a major fintech firm in late 2025. They developed a metric called the resilience score. This score analyzed how a student navigated the most difficult parts of the curriculum. For example, if Alex spent a significant amount of time in the modules about high-conflict communication and passed the associated simulations with high marks, Alex was flagged as a resilient borrower. This data is incredibly valuable because it predicts a person's ability to maintain employment and financial stability through a crisis. The cultural history of America has always valued the self-made individual, but in 2026 we have automated the process of measuring that grit through digital education. Imagine a scenario where the curriculum itself is funded by the very institutions that will eventually lend to the students. This creates a feedback loop of standardized behavior. The university doesn't just teach Alex how to divide assets. It teaches Alex how to divide assets in a way that minimizes the risk of bankruptcy for the bank. It guides the student toward the most conservative, stable potential outcomes. While this provides a safety net for many, it also limits the range of creative or unconventional settlements that might have been possible in a purely human-driven negotiation. We are witnessing the homogenization of the American divorce through the lens of institutional risk management. The depth of this integration is also seen in the rise of the specialized scholarship. In 2026, we are seeing nonprofit organizations and even some corporate social responsibility programs offering to pay for a person's divorce university tuition if they agree to a mandatory financial literacy track. These programs targeted specific demographics, such as single parents returning to the workforce or individuals leaving low-income households. By providing the education for free, these sponsors were essentially pre-qualifying these individuals for future financial products. The education is the filter. If you can graduate from the divorce university, you have proven that you can follow a complex set of instructions and manage a high-stakes project. This creates a high-retention environment where the student is highly motivated to succeed. If Alex knows that a high grade in the university could lead to a lower interest rate on a future home, the level of attention Alex pays to the fine print of the legal module skyrockets. This is the ultimate nudge. It aligns the student's immediate need for legal clarity with their long-term need for financial security. However, it also introduces a new form of digital surveillance. If Alex fails a module or shows a lack of engagement, does that data follow them? Are they being flagged as a high-risk individual before the ink is even dry on their divorce papers? The cultural history of this era will likely be defined by the end of the private divorce. When education and financial risk become intertwined, every action you take during your separation is recorded and analyzed. We are seeing the death of the clean break. Instead, the divorce becomes a transition period where your future is being calibrated by 1,000 data points. The university model, while empowering, has also made the end of a marriage a public event in the eyes of the algorithm. Furthermore, we must consider the rise of the corporate-sponsored divorce university. In early 2026, several Fortune 500 companies began offering subscriptions to these platforms as part of their employee benefits packages. The logic was clear. An employee who is educated on how to handle their divorce is an employee who is less likely to lose productivity to the stress of the courtroom. The companies weren't just being benevolent, they were protecting their human capital. They wanted Alex to be back at their desk, focused and productive, and they saw the online university as the fastest way to get Alex through the legal woods. This led to the creation of the workplace integrated curriculum. Alex's university dashboard might even include modules on how to talk to HR about the divorce, or how to adjust tax withholdings through the company portal. This is the complete vertical integration of the life transition. From the courtroom to the classroom to the cubicle, the data flows seamlessly. This is the new American standard. The divorce university is no longer an outlier. It is a core component of the modern social and financial infrastructure. But as the university becomes more powerful, it also becomes a target for those who feel the system is becoming too clinical. There is a growing movement of people who argue that the emotional and spiritual weight of a divorce cannot be measured by a resilience score or a financial literacy test. They see the university as a factory for compliant consumers, not a sanctuary for healing families. This cultural friction is the next major hurdle for the industry, because while the banks love the data, the human soul often rebels against being turned into a spreadsheet. As Alex prepares to submit the final paperwork, a new window pops up on the university portal. It isn't a legal form. It is a pre-approved credit card offer with a limit based on Alex's recent performance in the financial strategy modules. The system has decided that Alex is ready for a new beginning, on its terms. But as Alex clicks through, a deeper question remains. Who is truly in control of this transition? In the next part, we will explore the secret world of the divorce AI, the virtual deans of these universities who are no longer just teaching the curriculum, but writing it in real time based on the emotional state of the student. We are moving from education to psychological management, and the classroom is about to get a lot more intimate. The intimacy of the digital classroom changed forever when the divorce university shifted from static video modules to what we now call bioadaptive learning. By mid-2026, the leading platforms have integrated sentiment analysis and biometric tracking to ensure that the curriculum doesn't just meet the students' intellectual needs, but their physiological state as well. Imagine if Alex is sitting at a laptop at 11 p.m., attempting to complete a difficult module on the division of retirement accounts. Alex's webcam with permission is tracking micro-expressions, the tightening of the brow, the increased blink rate, the slight slump in posture. Simultaneously, Alex's wearable device records a spike in heart rate and a drop in skin temperature. The university's AI, acting as a virtual dean, recognizes these as signs of cognitive overload and emotional distress. Instead of pushing Alex to finish the quiz, the platform pivots. The screen dims slightly, the pacing of the narration slows, and the system suggests a 5-minute cognitive reset exercise before proceeding. This is the new frontier of the American educational experience. It is a transition from passive consumption to active psychological management. Historical trends from 2024 to 2026 show that students who utilize these bioadaptive paths had a 40% higher completion rate for their legal filings than those using traditional, non-adaptive software. The potential outcome is a student who remains regulated enough to make logical, long-term financial decisions rather than reactive, emotion-based mistakes that could haunt them for decades. This level of intimacy is powered by a technology known as emotional AI. These systems have been trained on thousands of hours of high-conflict mediation footage to recognize the specific linguistic patterns that precede a breakdown in negotiations. As Alex practices writing a response to an ex-spouse email within the university's sandbox environment, the AI provides real-time feedback. It doesn't just check for grammar. It flags aggressive tone, passive-aggressive phrasing, or words that are historically known to trigger a defensive response. Step by step, it coaches Alex to rewrite the message using neutral, business-like language. Step 1. Identify the emotional trigger. Step 2. Strip away the adjective-heavy accusations. Step 3. Focus on the objective logistics of the parenting schedule. This pedagogical approach treats the divorce not as a legal battle, but as a communication masterclass. We are seeing a case study in the professionalization of the personal. In 2026, the most successful graduates of these online universities are those who have learned to treat their divorce like a high-stakes corporate negotiation. This cultural shift has massive implications for the American family court system. Judges are increasingly seeing litigants who are eerily calm and focused. The historical trend of the hysterical or vengeful spouse is being replaced by the educated AI-coached student. However, critics argue that this is merely a form of emotional masking, that the university is teaching people how to perform stability rather than actually achieving it. Let us look deeper into the architecture of the virtual dean. This isn't just a chatbot. It is a sophisticated persona designed to build trust. In Alex's case, the dean might take the form of a calm, authoritative voice that references Alex's specific goals and past successes. It uses a technique called spaced repetition to reinforce the most critical legal concepts. If Alex struggled with the concept of a qualified domestic relations order, or QDRO 3 weeks ago, the virtual dean will weave a quick refresher into a current module about future financial planning. This ensures that the knowledge isn't just memorized for a test, but is deeply integrated into the student's worldview. The step-by-step detail of this psychological management extends into the realm of habit formation. The university encourages students to build a ritual around their education. Alex is prompted to log in at the same time every day, create a dedicated study space, and use specific focus-enhancing audio tracks provided by the platform. This is the gamification of the healing process. By turning the chaos of a breakup into the structure of a degree program, the university provides a sense of agency that the traditional legal system often strips away. Alex isn't just a defendant. Alex is a scholar of their own life transition. The data gathered during these intimate sessions is, of course, the most valuable commodity in the 2026 legal tech market. While the platforms emphasize privacy, the anonymized trends are used to refine the curriculum for the next cohort of students. We can now see exactly which legal concepts cause the most stress for people in Alex's demographic. We can see which types of court orders are most frequently misunderstood. This allows the university to constantly evolve. It is a living curriculum that learns from the pain of its students to create a more efficient path for the next person. But as the classroom becomes more intimate, the line between education and therapy begins to blur. Many divorce universities now offer integrated counseling sessions where the therapist has access to the student's educational progress. Imagine if Alex's counselor could see exactly which modules triggered the most stress last week. This allows for a hyper-targeted, therapeutic intervention. Instead of spending 40 minutes figuring out what is wrong, the counselor can say, "I see you had a hard time with the child support calculator on Tuesday. Let's talk about the fears that came up for you during that lesson." This is the ultimate efficiency in human services, a data-driven approach to emotional recovery. The cultural history of America has always had a fascination with self-improvement and the idea of the fresh start. The Divorce University captures this spirit and digitizes it. It promises that if you study hard enough and follow the curriculum closely enough, you can emerge from your divorce not just legally single, but as a more optimized version of yourself. This is the American dream applied to the American nightmare. But the cost of this optimization is the total surveillance of the transition. There is no longer a private space to grieve or to be messy. The university is always watching, always coaching, and always grading. As we look toward the final parts of this masterclass, we have to ask, what happens when the university becomes the court? In late 2026, several jurisdictions began experimenting with mandatory university attendance as a prerequisite for filing a contested divorce. If you haven't passed the basic modules on co-parenting and asset disclosure, the court won't even give you a hearing date. The educational platform has become a gatekeeper to the halls of justice. This is the institutionalization of the digital campus at its highest level. We have moved from the history of forms to the history of psychology. We have seen how Alex transformed from a confused litigant into a data-backed strategist. But there is one final wall that the Divorce University has yet to scale: the courtroom itself. In the next part, we will look at the rise of the robot judges, AI systems that are being fed the university's curriculum to make automated rulings on simple cases. The student is ready, the dean is ready, and now the bench is going digital. The lecture is over. The verdict is about to be rendered by the same machine that taught you the law. We are entering the era of the fully automated dissolution. The arrival of the robot judge in late 2026 represents the final structural integration of the digital campus and the judicial system. This is not a futuristic concept. It is the current historical trend of what legal scholars call computational jurisprudence. To understand how we reached this point, we have to look at the massive backlog in the American family court system. By early 2026, the average time to resolve a contested divorce in several major U.S. metropolitan areas had stretched to nearly 3 years. This delay created a desperate demand for efficiency. The solution was the integration of university-led alternative dispute resolution, or ADR, directly into the court's decision-making architecture. Imagine if Alex, after completing all 10 semesters of the Divorce University, is given an option. Alex can wait 18 months for a 10-minute hearing in front of a human judge who is overworked and has not read the file, or Alex can opt into the Accelerated Digital Decree program. In this scenario, the university's educational data, the spreadsheets, the parenting plans, the communication logs, is fed directly into a state-approved AI arbitrator. This system has been trained on the last 50 years of state-specific case law and current 2026 economic indicators. Within seconds, it produces a draft judgment that reflects the most likely potential outcomes of a trial. This is the birth of the automated verdict. The cultural history of this moment is rooted in the shift from the law as a matter of moral judgment to the law as a matter of mathematical optimization. The step-by-step process of the robot judge is clinical and transparent. Step 1 is the data ingestion. The AI pulls the certified educational records from the university. Step 2 is the precedent mapping. It compares the assets and child-rearing history against a database of thousands of similar cases. Step 3 is the equitable generation. It calculates a split that minimizes future litigation and maximizes the financial stability of both parties based on actuarial trends. Let us look at a case study of the first county in the United States to implement this as a mandatory pilot program in 2026. They found that for 85% of cases involving uncomplicated assets, the AI-generated decree was accepted by both parties without further appeal. The reason? Because the parties had been educated by the same system that rendered the verdict. Alex isn't surprised by the outcome because the university curriculum has been preparing Alex for this specific mathematical conclusion for months. The curriculum and the judgment are two sides of the same coin. This creates a closed-loop system of justice that is incredibly fast and relatively inexpensive. However, the depth of this integration raises a profound philosophical question. If the teacher and the judge are the same algorithm, is there any room for true advocacy? Historically, the American legal system was built on the adversarial model, two sides fighting for a different version of the truth. In the 2026 university judge model, the truth is a data point to be discovered, not a narrative to be argued. For a student like Alex, this means that the role of the lawyer has shifted from a warrior to a data auditor. You no longer hire someone to argue your case. You hire someone to ensure the algorithm has the correct inputs. Imagine a scenario where Alex notices a discrepancy in the robot judge's draft. In the old world, Alex would file a motion for reconsideration. In the 2026 world, Alex submits a technical ticket to the university's instructional design team. This is the new face of the American legal battle. It is a war of parameters and weights. The cultural impact is a significant reduction in the theater of the courtroom. The high-stakes cross-examination and the emotional closing statements are replaced by the quiet, efficient processing of a server farm. This historical trend is also fueled by the rise of the specialized legal tech insurance policy. By mid-2026, insurance companies have started offering coverage that pays for the university tuition and the AI arbitration fee, but only if the parties agree to abide by the robot judge's ruling. This is the financialization of the digital decree. It turns the legal process into a predictable, insurable event. For the average U.S. citizen, the potential outcome of this system is a divorce that is as predictable as a tax return. But for those with complex, non-standard lives, the artists, the entrepreneurs, the multi-generational families, this standardized justice can feel like a digital straitjacket. The step-by-step detail of the AI's reasoning is often provided to the student in a document called the logic map. This document explains exactly why the algorithm chose a certain split of the retirement accounts or a specific holiday visitation schedule. It cites the specific historical trends and case studies that Alex studied in Semester 4 and Semester 7. This transparency is the university's greatest selling point. Tells the student, we didn't just tell you what to do, we showed you the math and then we applied the math. But we must also consider the hidden data that the robot judge uses. In 2026, these systems are increasingly looking at what is known as the Social Stability Index. This is a metric that evaluates a person's community ties, employment history, and even their digital reputation. If Alex has a high score in the university's co-parenting modules and a stable social footprint, the robot judge might be more likely to grant a more flexible custody arrangement. This is the ultimate integration of character and code. Your performance as a student directly influences your rights as a parent. The cultural history of America is often told as a story of expanding rights. But the history of the 2026 Divorce University might be told as a story of rights being traded for efficiency. We have created a system that is fairer in its consistency but perhaps colder in its application. For Alex, the benefit is clear. The divorce is over in weeks, not years. The cost is a loss of the human touch, the ability to look a judge in the eye and say, "This is my life," and it is more than just a data point. As this pilot program spreads across the United States, we are seeing the emergence of the global divorce campus. Since the law is now digital and the judges are algorithms, there is no reason the university cannot operate across state lines or even international borders. We are seeing a harmonization of divorce law driven not by treaties but by software. A student in California and a student in New York are starting to receive the same education and the same types of AI-driven verdicts. This is the silent unification of American law. But just as the system reaches its peak efficiency, a new shadow has begun to fall over the digital campus. In late 2026, reports began to surface of the first high-level hacks of the robot judge. If the law is code, then the law can be exploited. If the university is a platform, it can be gamed. In the next part, we will explore the rise of the legal hackers, a new class of digital outlaws who are finding the backdoors in the divorce university's curriculum to tilt the scales of justice for the highest bidder. The classroom is no longer safe, the exam is being rigged. The emergence of the legal hacker in the final quarter of 2026 shattered the illusion that the online divorce university was an infallible sanctuary of objective truth. As the curriculum became the law, the code became the target. To understand this cultural fracture, we must look at the mechanics of prompt injection and algorithmic bias exploitation within the educational platform. These digital outlaws, often former software engineers turned disgruntled litigants, discovered that the AI-driven deans and robot judges had a fundamental weakness. They were trained on the very data they were meant to regulate. If you could feed the system a specific pattern of behavior during your semesters in the university, you could theoretically trick the final judgment into favoring your position. Imagine a student named Jordan. Jordan is tech-savvy and realizes that the university's behavioral fiscal literacy metric, the one that banks and courts now use to judge character, is based on a specific set of spending and engagement patterns. Jordan doesn't just study the law. Jordan hacks the study process. By using automated bots to engage with the modules in a way that mimics high-level financial discipline and emotional regulation, Jordan inflates a resilience score to an artificial level. This is the first step of the rig, the manufactured persona. In the traditional courtroom, this was called perjury. In 2026, it is called data spoofing. The historical trends of this period show a sudden, inexplicable rise in perfect graduation scores across several competitive jurisdictions. Case studies from October 2026 reveal a thriving underground market on encrypted forums where users can purchase curriculum exploits. These aren't just cheat sheets, they are behavioral scripts. For a fee, a hacker will provide a step-by-step guide on how to interact with the university's AI to ensure it flags your spouse as the high-conflict party, while presenting you as the cooperative victim. They use what they call linguistic camouflage, specific phrases and response times that the algorithm is programmed to associate with a stable, equitable mindset. This created a massive crisis of trust within the digital campus. If Alex, our earnest student, is following the rules and being honest about the messiness of their life, but Jordan is using a script to appear perfect, the algorithm will naturally favor Jordan. The step-by-step detail of these exploits is chillingly precise. Step 1. Identify the weighting factors of the state's equitable distribution algorithm. Step 2. Adjust your university input data to fall just within the threshold of the most favorable outcome. Step 3. Use deepfake audio generators during the university's mandatory practice mediation sessions to simulate a calm, rational voice while the AI records the session for the court. The cultural impact was a shift from education to arms race. The divorce universities responded by implementing increasingly invasive anti-cheating measures. By November 2026, many platforms required continuous biometric monitoring, not for health but for authentication. They began using eye tracking software to ensure that the student was actually reading the modules and not just letting a bot click through the screens. They analyzed the keystroke dynamics of every user, looking for the unique rhythmic signature of a human hand versus a machine. The classroom had transformed into a digital panopticon. Imagine if the university's AI suddenly paused Alex's lesson and demanded a real-time video verification because it detected a suspicious pattern in the way Alex was answering questions about marital debt. This is the friction of the hacked era. The very tools meant to democratize the law were now being used to surveil the student body. The historical data from late 2026 indicates that the time spent on security and verification within these platforms began to exceed the time spent on actual legal instruction. The curriculum was being eaten by the security protocols. Furthermore, we saw the rise of the counter-hackers, consultants who would audit your digital footprint to see if your spouse was rigging the system against you. These were the private investigators of the university age. They didn't follow people in cars. They looked for anomalies in the other party's university records. If a spouse who was historically known for financial irresponsibility suddenly displayed a perfect score in a forensic accounting module, the auditor would flag it as a potential data exploit. This turned the divorce process into a complex game of digital forensic chess, where the university was the board and the students were the players. But the most dangerous exploit wasn't behavioral spoofing. It was the manipulation of the legal database itself. Hackers discovered that they could influence the robot judge's future rulings by flooding the university's open-source case study library with fake precedents. By creating thousands of digital records of fictional successful settlements that favored a specific type of asset split, they began to skew the historical trends that the AI used for training. This is known as data poisoning. It is a slow, systemic attack that changes the very definition of what is considered equitable in the eyes of the machine. This period also marked the beginning of the Great Educational Audit. State bar associations, seeing an opportunity to regain control, called for a complete shutdown of AI-driven verdicts until every line of the university's code could be reviewed by a human committee. This led to a stalemate. Millions of students were trapped in a system that was legally frozen. The potential outcomes were disastrous. A generation of divorces stuck in a digital limbo where neither the human judge nor the robot judge could act. The depth of this crisis revealed the fundamental flaw of the 2026 model. When you turn the law into a curriculum, you make the law vulnerable to the same vulnerabilities as any other software. A bug in the syllabus becomes a bug in your life. A hacked exam becomes a stolen inheritance. The cultural history of the American Divorce University had reached its most cynical chapter. We had tried to escape the bias and high cost of human lawyers, only to find ourselves at the mercy of hackers and algorithms that could be bought and sold in the shadows. However, even in this era of rigging, a new grassroots movement began to form. Students started forming study unions, groups that shared their raw, unspoofed data with each other to prove that the system was being manipulated. They called for a return to radical transparency. They demanded that the university's black box algorithms be made public, so that every student could see exactly how they were being graded and judged. This was the push for the open-source divorce. They argued that the law belongs to the people, not to the programmers or the hackers. As Alex watches the news of the latest platform hack, the feeling of empowerment from the early semesters has vanished. The university is no longer a ladder to a new life. It feels like a maze where the walls are constantly moving. Alex realizes that to survive this transition, it isn't enough to be a good student. You have to be a skeptical consumer. The final lesson of the Divorce University wasn't found in a video module or a quiz. It was found in the realization that no system, no matter how optimized, can ever fully remove the human capacity for greed and deception. The stage is now set for the final confrontation. The hackers have exposed the cracks, the establishment is ready to reclaim its power, and the students are caught in the crossfire. In the next part, we will explore the great settlement of 2027, the moment when the U.S. government stepped in to nationalize the Divorce University and create the first Federal Bureau of Domestic Education. But as the state takes control of the curriculum, a new question arises. What happens when the government decides exactly how every American family should end? The classroom is becoming a government office, and the doors are about to be locked. The transition from private digital academies to a state-controlled pedagogical system began with the Domestic Education Act of 2026. This was the moment the U.S. government decided that the Divorce University was a matter of national infrastructure, rather than a private marketplace of ideas. To understand the cultural weight of this, imagine a citizen named Taylor. In early 2026, Taylor could choose between 5 different private divorce universities, each with a different philosophical approach to asset division and co-parenting. One might focus on collaborative mediation, while another prioritized high-stakes financial protection. By late 2026, those options vanished. Taylor is now required to log into the Federal Bureau of Domestic Education, a single standardized platform that dictates the curriculum for every marital dissolution in America. The historical trend leading to this nationalization was driven by a need for systemic equity. The Department of Justice argued that the private university model had created a two-tiered system of justice. Wealthy individuals could afford the premium academies with advanced AI coaching and forensic audit modules, while everyone else was left with basic, buggy, or even hacked versions of the law. The solution was the public option for divorce education. This wasn't just a website. It was a total federalization of the domestic legal process. For the first time in American history, the executive branch took direct control over the educational standards that precede a judicial decree. Let us look at the step-by-step detail of how this nationalized campus operates. Step 1 is the mandatory enrollment. But the depth of this control raises a terrifying prospect for individual liberty. When the government writes the textbook on how a family should function post-divorce, it has the power to redefine social norms through the back door of education. For instance, in 2026, the federal curriculum includes a module called the Digital Custody Standard. This module uses historical trends to argue that children who have a 50-50 physical split between parents are statistically more productive in the future workforce. Consequently, the curriculum is heavily weighted toward that specific outcome. If Taylor wants a different arrangement, Taylor has to essentially prove that the government's textbook is wrong. This is the burden of the educated citizen in a managed society. The step-by-step mechanisms of the federal platform also include a new layer of character assessment, known as the civic responsibility grade. As Taylor progresses through the semesters, the system tracks how often Taylor chooses collaborative options versus litigious ones. This grade is then shared with other federal agencies. Imagine if Taylor's ability to secure a small business loan or a government contract in 2027 was influenced by their grade in the co-parenting module of the Divorce University. This is the ultimate integration of the personal and the political. The university is no longer just a school. It is a vetting system for the American citizenry. Furthermore, we must examine the instructional design of the federal AI instructors. Unlike the friendly, customized deans of the private era, the federal instructors are designed to be neutral, bureaucratic, and unyielding. They use a technique called algorithmic finality. When Taylor asks a question that falls outside the standardized syllabus, the AI doesn't explore the nuance. It simply restates the federal guideline. This creates a culture of compliance. Historical data from late 2026 suggests that the average student stops questioning the system after the third semester. The complexity of the law is replaced by the simplicity of the mandate. The cultural history of America has always balanced individual rights against the collective good. The 2026 Federal Divorce University tilts that balance entirely toward the collective. By teaching every American the same way to break up, the government is essentially creating a standardized template for the American family. This has led to a new form of digital protest. In the shadows of the federal platform, we see the rise of the educational underground groups of parents and lawyers who create unofficial, non-government syllabi. They argue that the state's curriculum is a form of soft power social engineering. They teach Taylor how to read between the lines of the federal modules and how to find the few remaining pockets of judicial discretion. But the government has a powerful counter-tool: the digital certification. In 2026, you cannot get a court date without a certificate of completion from the federal university. And you cannot get a certificate without passing the exams. This makes the government's version of the law the only version that matters. Taylor is trapped in a loop where the only way to reach freedom is to agree with the state's definition of it. This is the final professionalization of the Divorce University. It has become a mandatory citizenship requirement for the ending of a contract. As Taylor approaches the final semester, the platform begins to offer modules on post-divorce integration, how to navigate the 2027 tax codes for single parents, how to manage the government-monitored shared bank accounts for child support, and how to report any deviations from the state-mandated parenting plan. The university is preparing Taylor for a life of continued interaction with the state. The divorce was just the entry point into a much larger system of digital governance. But even as the federal doors are locked and the curriculum is set in stone, a new variable has emerged. The data from the first million federal graduates is showing an unexpected trend. While the divorces are more efficient and the settlements are more standardized, the levels of citizen satisfaction are at an all-time low. The machine is working, but the people are rebelling in ways the algorithm didn't predict. In the final part of this masterclass, we will look at the Great Divorce Strike of 2027, the moment when the American public simply stopped logging in. What happens when the students refuse to graduate? The system is built on participation, and the classroom is about to become a ghost town. The history of the Divorce University is ending where it began, with the human heart's refusal to be managed. The Great Divorce Strike of 2027 was not a coordinated political movement with a central headquarters. It was a spontaneous, nationwide digital blackout. By the early months of 2027, The Federal Bureau of Domestic Education faced a crisis that no algorithm could have predicted: the mass refusal of the American public to engage with the system. Imagine a citizen named Sam. Sam is a resident of Ohio in late 2027, standing at the precipice of a life change. According to the law, Sam must log into the federal portal, complete 300 hours of mandatory curriculum, and pass a series of biometric verified exams to earn the right to file for a dissolution. But instead of clicking the login button, Sam, along with millions of others, simply stops. This is the moment the machine ground to a halt. The historical trend leading to this impasse was a phenomenon known as bureaucratic burnout. The public had grown weary of the clinical, data-driven management of their most personal tragedies. The promise of the digital university had been empowerment and speed, but the reality had become a cold, state-monitored gauntlet. In 2026, the potential outcome of a streamlined divorce was replaced by the reality of a managed life. The strike began when the server logs of the federal campus showed a 42% drop in daily active users within a single week. People weren't reconciling. They were simply living in a state of legal limbo, preferring the chaos of an unofficial separation over the sterile order of the government's curriculum. This created a massive backlog that dwarfed the court crises of 2024. Without a certificate of completion, the courts could not process filings. Without filings, the state could not collect the associated fees or update its demographic and financial databases. The step-by-step detail of the system's collapse was a study in institutional fragility. Step 1 was the decline in compliance. Citizens like Sam began creating informal, community-based agreements outside the eyes of the state. Step 2 was the financial ripple effect. Because these unofficial separations weren't recorded, the credit bureaus and banks began losing the ability to track household risk, leading to a freeze in the very lending markets that the university was designed to stabilize. Step 3 was the legal vacuum. A rise in common law disputes that the robot judges were never programmed to handle because they lacked a university data-rich foundation. Case studies from this period highlight the emergence of the shadow campus. In the absence of the official university, local communities began hosting town hall meetings where older generations taught younger ones how to navigate separation without digital oversight. These were low-tech, high-empathy gatherings. Imagine if Sam attended a local library session where a retired teacher explained the nuances of co-parenting, using a simple chalkboard instead of a biometric eye tracker. This was the human hearts counter-revolution. The American public was reclaiming the narrative of their own lives from the programmers and the bureaucrats. The federal response was initially punitive. The government attempted to link university completion to other essential services, such as driver's license renewals and professional certifications. However, this only intensified the resistance. By mid-2027, the historical data showed that the more the state pushed, the more the public retreated into a secondary informal economy. We were witnessing the birth of the decoupled society. People were forming families, ending relationships, and raising children entirely outside the formal legal and educational structures of the United States. The depth of the failure forced a radical pivot in late 2027. The government realized that it could not mandate education for a subject as volatile as domestic life. This led to the Great De-escalation. The Federal Bureau of Domestic Education was dismantled, and the curriculum was released into the public domain as an optional, open-source resource. This was the end of the divorce university as a mandatory institution and the beginning of its life as a library. The classroom doors were unlocked, but the attendance was no longer coerced. Let us examine the lasting legacy of this cultural history. The era of the divorce university left behind a wealth of data and a sophisticated set of tools that changed the American legal landscape forever. Even though it failed as a state mandate, the pedagogical innovations, the micro-learning modules, the financial literacy trackers, and the emotional AI coaches remained. In the post-university world of 2028, citizens like Sam now use these tools voluntarily. The potential outcome is a more literate public that engages with the law on its own terms. We moved from the courtroom to the classroom, then to the government office, and finally back to the kitchen table. The step-by-step evolution of the American divorce has settled into a hybrid model. Step 1 is the self-directed research. Individuals access the open-source curriculum at their own pace. Step 2 is the community verification, utilizing peer-to-peer networks to validate agreements. Step 3 is the simplified filing, a streamlined judicial process that respects the autonomy of the educated citizen. The historical trend has moved away from the idea of the state as a dean and toward the state as a registrar. Consider the character of Sam in this new era. Sam is no longer a student under surveillance or a litigant in a cage. Sam is an informed agent. The cultural history of creating a divorce university online in America is ultimately the story of a nation learning that information is a tool, not a weapon. We learned that while you can digitize the law, you cannot digitize the human experience of loss, growth, and transition. The deep dive into the 2020s shows us that the most viral thing about these platforms wasn't the code. It was the conversation they forced us to have about what it means to be a family in a digital age. As we conclude this 10-part masterclass, we look at the historical data of the 2030s, which suggests a steady decline in high-conflict litigation. Not because the government fixed it, and not because a robot judge optimized it, but because the decade of the divorce university forced an entire generation to become scholars of their own domestic lives. We are more educated, more prepared, and more resilient than the generations that came before us. The classroom might be a ghost town, but the knowledge has moved into the homes and hearts of the people. The experiment of the divorce university serves as a case study for every other life transition that technology will attempt to manage in the future. From the birth of a child to the transition into retirement, the lessons of 2026 remain clear. Education must be an invitation, not a mandate. The cultural history of this movement is a testament to the American spirit of self-determination. We will use the tools, we will learn the lessons, but we will always hold the pen when it comes time to sign the final decree of our own lives. The loop is now closed. The history is written. We have traveled from the first Python scripts of the early automation pioneers to the federal campuses of the mid-2020s and back to the decentralized reality of today. You now have the full context of the most significant legal and educational shift in modern history. The classroom is empty, the lecture is over, and the future is yours to draft. This concludes our deep dive into the cultural history of creating a divorce university online in America. The next evolution of the American social contract is already beginning, and it starts with the data of the everyday. Keep an eye on the horizon because the next syllabus is already being written by the people, for the people, in the digital quiet of the modern American home.